He fired the black nanny on Christmas Eve, just hours before his son spoke his first word in nearly a year. But when the boy finally opened his mouth, "It wasn't Dad," he said. Snow drifted quietly over Manhattan, coating the city in a soft, glowing white. From the outside, Ethan Cole's mansion looked like a scene pulled straight from a holiday dream. Warm golden lights wrapped around every balcony, towering glass windows, reflecting the shimmer of Christmas decorations, and a grand tree standing proudly in the center of the living room. Inside, everything was perfect. Too perfect. The kind of perfection that felt empty. Ethan stood by the window, his tall figure outlined against the cold night sky. A glass of whiskey rested untouched in his hand, the ice long melted. At 42, he had everything: power, wealth, control. His name moved markets. His decisions shaped companies. But inside this house, none of that mattered. "Mr. Cole," a soft voice called from behind him. He didn't need to turn. Annie Brooks, the nanny he never wanted, the one his son refused to let go. "I told you to keep him upstairs," Ethan said, his voice calm but edged with quiet authority. "He wouldn't sleep," Annie replied gently. "He kept looking for you." Ethan let out a breath, almost dismissive. "He doesn't need me. He needs structure, routine, not attachment." Upstairs, a faint creak, then small footsteps. Both of them turned. Noah stood at the top of the staircase, 7 years old, silent, fragile. His small hands gripped the railing as his wide eyes moved slowly past his father and landed on Annie. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Go back to your room." Noah didn't move, didn't speak. He hadn't spoken in 11 months, not since the night his mother died. Annie stepped forward slightly, her voice softer now. "It's okay, Noah. You can come down." "No." Ethan's voice cut through the air instantly. "That's not your decision." Silence followed, heavy. Then Ethan turned fully toward her, his expression unreadable. "This isn't working." Annie's fingers tightened at her sides. "You've been here 3 weeks," he continued, "and nothing has changed." That wasn't true. But Ethan wasn't looking for truth. "I'm letting you go," he said. The words landed quietly, but upstairs, something shifted. Noah's grip tightened. His lips parted, just slightly, as if something buried deep inside him was finally breaking free. The last time Noah spoke, his mother was still alive. It had been a snowy night just like this one. The roads were slick, the city glowing under Christmas lights, and laughter had filled the car as they drove back from a holiday party. Ethan remembered every detail with painful clarity: the way his wife had turned to look at Noah in the back seat, smiling. The way she had said something soft, something warm, something he could no longer hear without feeling his chest tighten. Then, headlights. Too close, too fast. The crash had been instant, violent, final. Ethan survived. Noah survived. But the woman who had held their world together didn't. And ever since that night, silence had taken her place. Noah stopped speaking the very next day. Doctors called it trauma. Therapists called it selective mutism. But none of their words explained the way the boy looked at the world now, as if something inside him had shut down completely, like a light that refused to turn back on. Ethan tried. At first, he hired specialists, flew in experts, built routines, schedules, systems, anything that could be measured, controlled, fixed. But nothing worked. And slowly, he stopped trying. Because trying meant remembering. And remembering meant facing the one truth he could never escape. He had been the one driving that night. Across the city, in a small apartment miles away from glass towers and private gates, Annie Brooks folded a worn sweater carefully into a duffel bag. She had done this before. Packing quietly, leaving quietly, starting over again. There was a rhythm to it now, one she had learned long before she ever stepped into Ethan Cole's world. Foster homes, temporary beds, people who promised to stay and never did. Annie had learned early that love was something fragile, something borrowed, something that could disappear overnight, so she stopped expecting it. Instead, she became the one who stayed. the one who cared, the one who filled in the gaps left behind by others. Children understood that kind of love, especially the ones who had already been broken. That was why she noticed Noah the moment she met him. He hadn't spoken, hadn't smiled, had barely even looked at her. But there had been something in his eyes. Recognition, not of who she was, but of what she carried. Loneliness. And something else. Fear of being left behind. Again. In the 3 weeks she had been in that house, Annie never pushed him, never asked him to speak. She simply sat beside him, drew pictures with him, read stories he didn't react to, waited, and slowly, something shifted. The first time Noah reached for her hand, it lasted less than a second, but it meant everything. The first time he stayed in the same room, while she sang softly to herself, his shoulders relaxed just slightly, and once, just once, he almost spoke. Annie had heard it. A breath, a sound, a beginning, but no one else believed her, especially not Ethan. To him, progress meant results. Visible, immediate, proven, and Annie had none to show. Only small moments, invisible ones, the kind that couldn't be measured on a report. Back in the mansion, the silence pressed heavier than before. Noah still stood frozen at the top of the stairs. Annie still stood near the door. And Ethan had already made his decision. What he didn't see, what he refused to see, was that everything he thought was nothing, was actually the beginning of something fragile, something real, something that only needed one more moment, one more chance to become a miracle. The first time Noah smiled, no one else saw it. It happened on a quiet afternoon, 3 days before Christmas. The house was unusually still. No business calls, no visitors, just the faint hum of the heating system and the soft ticking of a clock somewhere in the distance. Outside, snow clung to the branches of bare trees, turning the world into something slower, softer. Annie sat cross-legged on the living room floor, a box of crayons spread out between her and Noah. She didn't speak. She rarely did when they were like this. Instead, she drew. Simple things. A house, a tree, a star. Nothing complicated. Nothing that demanded a response. Noah sat across from her, quiet as always, his small hands resting in his lap. His eyes followed the movement of her crayon as it slid across the paper, slow and steady. After a while, Annie gently pushed a blank sheet toward him. No pressure, no expectation, just an invitation. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then, slowly, he reached out. His fingers hovered over the crayons before selecting one. Blue. Annie didn't react, didn't smile, didn't encourage. She simply kept drawing her own picture, as if nothing had changed. But inside, she held her breath. Noah pressed the crayon to the paper. At first, it was just a line, then another, uneven, shaky, but intentional. Minutes passed like that. Quiet, focused, safe, until finally, Noah stopped. He stared at what he had drawn. Then, almost without thinking, he shifted the paper toward Annie. It was the smallest gesture, but it meant everything. Annie glanced down. Her eyes softened. It was a stick figure, small, standing beside a taller one, and above them, a crooked circle meant to be the sun. Or maybe, something brighter. Annie looked back at Noah, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's beautiful." Noah didn't speak, but something changed in his face. A flicker, quick, almost invisible, but it was there. A smile, small, fragile, real. Later that evening, the house felt different. Warmer, not because of the fireplace, not because of the decorations, but because something had shifted. In a way no one could quite explain. Even Ethan noticed. He stood at the edge of the living room, watching from a distance as Annie helped Noah hang ornaments on the Christmas tree. "You don't have to do this," Ethan said, his voice low, guarded. Annie didn't turn. He wanted to. Ethan's gaze moved to Noah. The boy was carefully placing a small ornament onto a lower branch, his movements slow but deliberate. That alone was unusual. He never engaged, never participated, never stayed. But now, he was. Ethan frowned slightly. It doesn't mean anything. Annie paused for a moment, before responding. Maybe not to you, she said gently. But it does to him. Ethan didn't reply, because part of him wasn't sure anymore. That night, as the house settled into silence once again, something even more unexpected happened. Noah didn't retreat into himself. He didn't hide in his room. Instead, he walked into the kitchen, where Annie stood quietly, rinsing dishes. She didn't notice him at first, but when she turned, there he was, standing in the doorway, watching her. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Annie knelt down slowly, lowering herself to his level. "Hey," she whispered. Noah's lips parted, just slightly. His chest rose, fell, rose again, as if something inside him was trying, fighting, to come out. Annie stayed completely still. No pressure, no fear, just presence. Noah took a small step forward, then another. His fingers reached out, grabbing onto the sleeve of her sweater, tightly, like he was afraid she might disappear. Annie's voice softened even more. "I'm here," she said. And for the briefest moment, a sound escaped him. Broken, barely there, but real. Annie's eyes widened just slightly. She didn't react, didn't push, because she knew. This was delicate. This was the beginning. And beginnings could be lost just as easily as they came. Upstairs, unseen, Ethan stood in the shadows of the hallway, watching, listening. For the first time in months, he hesitated, because something inside him was starting to question everything he thought he knew. And downstairs, a boy who hadn't spoken in nearly a year was closer than ever to finding his voice. The first article went live the morning of Christmas Eve. Billionaire CEO Ethan Cole grows suspiciously close to Black Nanny, the headline read. By noon, it was everywhere. Screens, phones, whispers, judgment. Ethan stared at the tablet in his office, his jaw tightening as he scrolled through the article. Photos taken from a distance showed Annie kneeling beside Noah in the garden, her hand gently resting on his shoulder. Another captured her adjusting his scarf near the front gate. To anyone else, they looked innocent. To the world, they looked like something else. A narrative was already forming. She's positioning herself. These women always do. From Nanny to something more. Ethan dropped the tablet onto his desk, his chest tightening not with anger alone, but something deeper. Something uncomfortable. Control slipping. A knock sounded at the door. "Come in." Victoria Cole stepped inside without waiting. Elegant, composed, sharp in every way that mattered. She didn't sit. "I assume you've seen it," she said. Ethan didn't respond. She took that as confirmation. "I warned you," Victoria continued, her tone calm but edged with quiet superiority. "You let someone like her into this house, into your son's life. And now this is what happens." Ethan's eyes lifted slowly. "Someone like her?" Victoria didn't flinch. "Don't pretend you don't understand what I mean." Silence stretched between them. Cold. Measured. "She's an employee," Ethan said finally. "Nothing more." Victoria stepped closer, placing a manicured hand on the desk. "Then act like it. Because right now, the press doesn't see an employee. They see a story. And stories destroy reputations." Ethan looked away. Not because he agreed, but because doubt had already taken root. Downstairs, unaware of the storm building above her, Annie sat beside Noah near the Christmas tree. The soft glow of the lights reflected in his eyes as he traced the outline of an ornament with his finger. "You like this one?" she asked gently. Noah didn't answer, but he didn't pull away either. That was enough. Annie smiled faintly, adjusting the ornament so it hung straight. "My mom used to say Christmas lights are like little reminders, that even in the dark, something can still shine." She paused, then added softly, "I think she was right." Noah's hand stilled. For a moment, it looked like he might respond, but instead, he just leaned slightly closer to her. Upstairs, Ethan watched from the balcony, and this time, he didn't just see a nanny doing her job, he saw something else. Something he couldn't control. something that didn't belong to him, and it unsettled him more than anything else. That evening, the tension in the house became impossible to ignore. Victoria remained. The staff moved quieter. The air itself felt heavier. Dinner was served in silence. Noah barely touched his food. Annie stayed close, but not too close. Always aware, always careful. Then, I think it's time we set some boundaries. Victoria's voice cut through the room like glass. Annie looked up. Ethan didn't. "What do you mean?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. Victoria folded her hands neatly in her lap. "I mean, your son is becoming dependent on her." The word hung there, heavy, unwelcome. "That's not dependency," Annie said softly. "That's trust." Victoria's gaze snapped to her instantly. "I wasn't asking for your opinion." Silence. Then Ethan spoke. "That's enough." But it wasn't clear who he was defending. Victoria leaned back slightly, satisfied. "You're too close to this, Ethan. You're not seeing clearly." Ethan's eyes shifted briefly to Noah, then to Annie, then away. And in that moment, he made his decision. Later that night, in the quiet of his office, he replayed everything. The article, the photos, his mother's words, the way Noah looked at Annie, the way he never looked at him. It wasn't just about reputation. It was about something deeper. Fear. Fear of losing control. Fear of being replaced. Fear of facing the truth he had avoided for so long. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. "Mr. Cole?" "Mr. Harris." "Yes?" The older man stepped inside slowly. "Miss Brooks is packing." Ethan's expression didn't change, but something in his chest tightened. "Good," he said. Mr. Harris hesitated. "Sir, if I may." "You may not." Silence again. Then Harris nodded quietly and left. Upstairs, in a dimly lit room, Annie zipped her bag slowly, carefully, like someone who had done this too many times before. She paused, looking around the room, not at the furniture, not at the walls, but at the small things. A drawing on the desk, a crayon left behind, a presence that wasn't hers, but had somehow become familiar. A soft sound behind her. She turned. Noah stood in the doorway, barefoot, silent, watching her. Annie's expression softened instantly. "Hey." Noah didn't move, didn't blink, but his breathing changed. Faster, uneven, as if something inside him was starting to panic. Annie knelt down slowly. "It's okay," she whispered. "I just have to go for a little while." That wasn't true, but it was easier. Noah's fingers curled slightly. His lips parted. A sound. Almost, but not quite. Annie reached out gently, brushing a strand of hair from his face. "You're going to be okay," she said softly, but Noah's eyes filled with something new. Not emptiness. Not silence. Something else. Something breaking. Downstairs, the front door opened. Cold air rushed in. Snow followed. And just as Annie picked up her bag, something inside Noah finally snapped. "Don't go." The words were broken. Fragile. Barely formed. But they were real. Time stopped. Annie froze where she stood, her hand still gripping the handle of her bag. For a second, she thought she had imagined it, that her heart had simply filled in the silence with something it desperately wanted to hear. But then, please. Noah's voice cracked through the room like glass, shattering after a year of stillness. Annie turned slowly. He was standing in the doorway, his small body trembling, his chest rising too fast, too uneven. Tears spilled down his cheeks, real tears, raw and uncontrollable. And his eyes, they weren't empty anymore. They were terrified. "Don't leave me." Annie dropped the bag. In 2 steps, she was in front of him, kneeling, her hands hovering for just a second, just enough to make sure. Then she pulled him into her arms. "I'm here," she whispered, her voice breaking now. "I'm right here." Noah clung to her like he was holding on to something that might disappear if he loosened his grip even slightly. Downstairs, the front door stood open. Cold air swept through the house. But no one moved, because something impossible had just happened. Ethan stood at the bottom of the stairs, frozen. He had heard it. Every word, every broken sound. His son spoke after 11 months of silence. He spoke, and he hadn't called for him. He had called for her. Something twisted deep in Ethan's chest, not anger, not pride, something sharper, something that hurt. Mr. Harris stepped quietly beside him. "Sir." Ethan didn't respond. Upstairs, Noah pulled back just enough to look at Annie, his small hands still gripping her sweater. His lips moved again, slow, careful, as if each word had to fight its way out. Mommy." The word landed softly, but its impact was devastating. Annie's breath caught. Her eyes filled instantly, but she didn't correct him, didn't pull away, because she understood something Ethan didn't. This wasn't about replacing anyone. This was about survival, about a child finally finding something safe enough to speak. Behind them, Ethan took a step forward, then another, each step heavier than the last. "Noah," he said, his voice low. Noah flinched, just slightly, but enough. Enough for Ethan to feel it like a blow. Annie looked up, her expression calm but firm. "He's overwhelmed," she said gently. "Please just give him a moment." Ethan stopped. For once, he listened. Noah buried his face back into Annie's shoulder, his small body still shaking. And in that moment, something shifted again. Not in Noah, in Ethan, because for the first time, he saw it clearly. Everything he had refused to see. This wasn't manipulation. This wasn't dependency. This was connection. Real. Uncontrolled. Unreplaceable. Mr. Harris spoke quietly from behind him. "Sir, there's something you should know." Ethan didn't look away. "What?" Harris hesitated, then continued. 3 nights ago, I found Noah in the hallway. He paused, choosing his words carefully. He was hurting himself. Ethan's head snapped slightly. "What?" He didn't speak, didn't cry, just sat there, hitting his arm against the wall. Harris's voice tightened. "Miss Brooks found him before I could reach him. She stayed with him all night. Wouldn't leave his side." Ethan's chest tightened. "She didn't tell you," Harris added quietly. "No," Ethan said, "because she hadn't. Because she wasn't there for recognition. She was there for him. For Noah." Upstairs, Annie rocked Noah gently, her hand moving slowly across his back. "You're okay," she whispered. "You're safe." Safe. A word Ethan had failed to give his own son. The weight of it settled over him all at once. The missed moments, the distance, the silence he had mistaken for strength. And suddenly, it was too much. Ethan turned away abruptly, running a hand through his hair, his breathing uneven now. "I didn't know," he muttered. Harris didn't respond, because that wasn't the point. Ethan looked back up, at the woman he had just fired, at the child who had just found his voice, because of her. And for the first time in a long time, he felt something break. Not anger, not control, something deeper, something human. He stopped. The words didn't come easily. They hadn't in a long time. Upstairs, Noah's grip on Annie finally loosened just slightly, but he didn't let go. He wouldn't. Not again. Annie looked down at him, then back toward Ethan. Their eyes met. And in that moment, no power, no wealth, no control mattered. Only truth. And Ethan saw it, clearer than anything else. He had been wrong. Completely, painfully, wrong. The storm outside intensified, snow hitting the windows harder now. And inside, a different kind of storm had just passed, leaving something fragile behind. Something new, something that could still be lost if he made the wrong choice again. Ethan took a step forward, then another, this time, not as a man trying to control everything, but as a father who was finally ready to try. Snow covered the city in a quiet, endless fall as Ethan stepped outside. The cold hit him instantly, but he barely felt it. "Miss Brooks!" he called out into the night. No answer. The wind carried his voice away, scattering it into the storm. For a moment, he stood there, frozen, just like he had been for the past year, watching, waiting, doing nothing. But not this time. Ethan stepped forward, his shoes crunching against the snow as he moved past the gates, scanning the street. The world beyond his mansion felt unfamiliar, real in a way his controlled, perfect life never had. "Annie," he called again, louder now. Still nothing. Then, a figure, just beyond the streetlight. Small, still. Annie. She stood there with her coat pulled tight around her, her bag at her side, her head slightly lowered as snow gathered on her shoulders. She hadn't gone far. Maybe she couldn't. Ethan slowed as he approached, his breath uneven, his heart pounding in a way he hadn't felt in years. "Wait," he said. Annie didn't turn immediately. When she finally did, her expression was calm but distant, the kind of distance that came from knowing when it was time to leave. "You don't have to do this," she said softly. Ethan stopped a few feet away from her, shaking his head. "No, I do." The words came out rough, unpolished, honest. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Snow fell between them, silent, unforgiving. Then Ethan exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. "I was wrong," he said. Annie didn't react. "Not yet. I thought I was protecting him," Ethan continued. "By controlling everything. By keeping things structured, predictable." He let out a bitter breath. "But all I did was push him further away." His voice faltered, something inside him cracking open. "I didn't see what you were doing," he admitted. "What you gave him? What you gave both of us." Annie's gaze softened slightly, but she didn't step closer, because words were easy. Staying was harder. "You hurt him," she said quietly. Ethan nodded immediately. "I know. You hurt me too." That one landed deeper. Ethan swallowed. "I know." Silence again. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was full of everything left unsaid. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Ethan said. "But please, don't leave." Annie's fingers tightened slightly around her bag. "He needs you," Ethan added. Annie shook her head gently. "He needs you." The truth of it hung there between them, heavy, unavoidable. Ethan took a step closer. "Then let me learn," he said. "Let me try. I don't know how to fix this, but I want to." For the first time, Annie hesitated, because she could hear it. Not power, not control, something real. Behind them, a small voice broke through the cold. "Annie." Both of them turned. Noah stood barefoot in the snow, his small body shaking, his face pale but his eyes locked on her. Ethan's heart dropped. "Noah." But the boy didn't look at him, only her. "Don't go," Noah said again, his voice still fragile but stronger now. Annie dropped her bag instantly and rushed forward, kneeling in front of him. Hey, you shouldn't be out here," she said, her voice trembling as she wrapped her arms around him. Noah clung to her again, tighter, stronger. Mommy," he whispered. The word came clearer this time, and it broke something open in all of them. Ethan stood just a few steps away, watching, not interrupted, not replaced, but included. For the first time, slowly, carefully, he stepped closer. "Noah," he said softly. This time, Noah didn't flinch. He didn't turn away. He stayed right where he was, holding on to Annie, but no longer afraid. Ethan knelt beside them, his voice unsteady. "Hey, buddy." Noah's eyes flickered toward him, just for a second, but it was enough. Ethan swallowed hard, reaching out slowly, giving him time to pull away if he needed to. But Noah didn't. His small hand loosened slightly from Annie's sweater and rested hesitantly on Ethan's sleeve. A connection. Small, fragile, but real. Annie watched it happen, her eyes filling with quiet emotion. Not loss, not replacement. Something better. Something whole. Snow continued to fall around them, covering the ground, softening the world into something gentler. And in that moment, the cold didn't feel so sharp anymore, because something warmer had taken its place. Back inside the house, the Christmas lights still glowed. The tree still stood. But now, the silence was gone, replaced by something new, something alive. Ethan stood later that night, by the window again. But this time, he wasn't alone. Noah sat beside him, wrapped in a blanket. Annie stood nearby, adjusting the lights on the tree. And for the first time in a long time, the house felt like a home. Ethan looked down at his son, then over at Annie, not as an employee, not as a stranger, but as someone who had changed everything. "Thank you," he said quietly. Annie smiled softly. "You stayed," she replied. Ethan shook his head slightly. "No," he said. "You did." Outside, the snow kept falling, but inside, a miracle had already happened. Not because of magic, but because someone chose to stay, when leaving would have been easier.